Welcome to Mind Shield. We protect the mind and pursue the truth. Let's get started.
Today, we are diving into a really fascinating and, let's be honest, pretty controversial patent. It's US Patent 8579793, and it makes a wild claim that it's possible to use the electrical wiring inside your own home to influence your brain. So let's get right into it.
I mean, that's a pretty provocative question, isn't it? It sounds like something straight out of a science fiction movie, but this isn't just some hypothetical what-if scenario.
Yep, that's right. This entire idea is actually detailed in a real, officially granted U.S. patent. And its claims, well, they're pretty extraordinary, connecting technology, electricity, and the human mind in a way you've probably never thought of.
Okay, so let's break down this patent's strange claim. How exactly is this supposed to work? We're going to look at the core mechanism, just sticking to the facts laid out in the patent's own description.
This quote really gets to the heart of it. The patent describes a method for creating very specific electromagnetic field patterns, EMFs, and then injecting them right into the standard AC wiring of a building. And the goal? To control the person's brain state, all without any kind of direct physical contact.
The whole process is laid out in a pretty clear sequence. You start with a special waveform generator that creates a very specific signal. Then that signal is coupled, or basically fed into, your home's power lines. As the electricity flows through the walls, the wiring gives off an electromagnetic field that carries this engineered pattern. The idea is that this ambient field then interacts with a person's body, and, here's the big claim, it can entrain their brainwaves to a desired state.
So, when you boil it all down, the crucial point is this. The patent imagines using your home's entire electrical system as one massive, building-wide antenna. Now, this hinges on a real principle. The wires in our walls do radiate weak electromagnetic fields. This patent just wants to take that idea a whole lot further.
Okay, so to really get a handle on the patent's claim, we've got to compare it to the established science. The patent uses this term brainwave entrainment, which is a real thing in neurology. So what does science actually say about it?
In the world of neuroscience, entrainment is basically when your brain's natural electrical rhythms, your brain waves, start to sync up with some kind of external rhythmic stimulus. A simple way to think about it is like when you can't help but tap your foot to the beat of a song. Your brain can do something kind of like that, but with other inputs.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because look at the contrast here. The patent proposes using this vague, ambient electromagnetic field floating around the room. But the methods that are scientifically proven, they're much more direct. We're talking about targeted things your senses can pick up, like flashing lights or pulsing sounds. Or they use powerful focus devices like transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS, which puts a magnetic coil right on your head to directly affect the brain.
This diagram is a perfect illustration of that conventional approach. It's from a completely different patent, one for a brainwave-inducing device, and it shows a system that uses lights. The stimulus literally enters through your eyes, a direct, hardwired sensory pathway straight to the brain. This is just fundamentally different from the indirect ambient field that the powerline patent is talking about. So, putting aside the biological questions for a second, any claim like this has to run the gauntlet of physics and safety. We have to look at the numbers and the fundamental laws that are at play here.
And that really brings us to the core engineering problem. Is it even possible to generate a signal from house wiring that is, on one hand, potent enough to actually have a specific neurological effect, but at the same time, weak enough to be considered safe for people to be around all the time? The first huge hurdle is something called building entry loss. Just look at this chart. Radio frequency, or RF, signals get a lot weaker when they have to pass through stuff like concrete walls or even just windows. So any signal coming off that wiring would have to fight its way through all these materials and still be strong enough to do anything.
And then there's what you could call the antenna problem. Your standard electrical wiring was never designed to be a good radio antenna. It's actually incredibly inefficient. It would create these very weak, chaotic fields that just kind of spread out everywhere, not the focused, stable signal you would absolutely need for a precise effect.
And of course, this is where safety is non-negotiable. There are international commissions, like ICNIRP, that have set very strict safety guidelines based on decades of research. And you can see here, for the frequency range we're talking about, the public exposure limit is 83 volts per meter. That's the line you can't cross.
So this creates a fundamental paradox, a real catch-22. If you create a signal that's weak enough to be safe under these international guidelines, it's almost certainly way too weak to have any reliable biological effect after all the losses. But if you crank up the signal to be strong enough to actually work the way the patent claims, well, then you'd almost certainly be generating a field that blows right past those safety limits.
All right, so when you're faced with a claim this extraordinary, the scientific way isn't to just believe it or dismiss it out of hand. The real question is, how could we actually test this thing? Let's put on our lab coats for a minute. If someone handed you a black box and claimed it worked this way, what are the concrete, measurable steps you would take to see if they're right?
Well, here's a basic checklist. First thing, you'd use a probe or a spectrum analyzer to see if the special signal is even on the wiring in the first place. Second, you'd scan the room to see if the wires are emitting anything that actually stands out from all the normal background electronic noise. And most importantly, you'd have to run a proper double-blind study. You'd hook people up to an EEG to measure their brain waves, and then see if their brain activity only changes when the device is secretly turned on, with them or even the researchers knowing. What you're looking for is a clear, repeatable cause and effect relationship.
You know, in the end, it really all comes back to this one simple idea. A claim as huge as remotely influencing brainwaves through the power lines in a house. That's not a small step, it's a giant leap. And a leap that big needs a mountain of clear, verifiable, and repeatable evidence to back it up.
The world is just full of fascinating ideas, and some pretty bold claims, right? And a lot of them push the boundaries of what we think we know. The key isn't to just say, no way, but to ask the right questions and demand the right kind of proof. So, what should we put to the test in our next explainer?